The Roman Empire, for all its grandeur, was a world built on shadows. Behind the gleaming marble temples and the triumphant arches of emperors, beneath the roar of gladiatorial games and the pomp of public ceremonies, lay a hidden economy of flesh. Among the most chilling aspects of that world were the boys, young slaves taken not only for labor, but for pleasure, their childhood stripped away, their lives consumed by the desires of others. Rome prided itself on law, discipline, and virtue. Yet within the imperial palaces, beneath frescoed ceilings and behind guarded doors, there existed a world of concubinage, boys bought, sold, and broken into roles as attendants, ornaments, and concubines. To the public, they were invisible, shadows at the emperor's side. To the emperors and nobles who kept them, they were property, bodies to be used, symbols of luxury and absolute power. Their lives were not their own. They belonged entirely to the whims of those who ruled. Capture, selection, and the path into the palace. The story of Rome's boy concubines often began far from the city itself, in conquered villages, slave raids, or bustling provincial markets. Children were the easiest prey in Rome's vast appetite for slaves. Wars in Gaul, Germania, Dacia, and the East brought a steady stream of captives. Boys were torn from their families, chained, marched hundreds of miles, and shipped across seas. They arrived in Rome bewildered, terrified, and utterly vulnerable. At the great slave markets, the Fora Venalia, their fate was decided. Traders displayed them like livestock, stripped bare to show their youth and health. Placards hung around their necks advertised their origin, age, and supposed qualities. Greek boys were prized for their beauty and intelligence, Syrians and Easterners for their exoticism, Gauls and Germans for their novelty. To Roman buyers, these were not children, but investments. The wealthiest patrons, senators, generals, and above all emperors, demanded only the finest. Slavers learned to select boys with delicate features, smooth skin, and submissive demeanors. These children fetched exorbitant prices, sold not for fields or kitchens, but for private chambers. To be purchased for the imperial household was both the highest and lowest fate. A boy might live in marble palaces instead of mines, yet he would spend his youth as an ornament, a captive of luxury that concealed degradation. Upon purchase, many boys were branded, an iron mark pressed into their skin to signify ownership. Some were tattooed with phrases like fugitivus, runaway, to deter escape. Others were marked more subtly, their beauty preserved for display, but their status as property forever stamped upon their bodies. For a child, this was the first ritual of dehumanization, the knowledge that his flesh was no longer his own. From the market, boys destined for concubinage were groomed. Their hair was styled, their bodies oiled, their manners trained. They were taught to walk silently, to serve wine, to stand at attention, to anticipate commands. Tutors taught them music, poetry, or witty conversation, for they were expected not merely to be seen, but to entertain. Their very innocence was transformed into a performance for the pleasure of Rome's elite. Those chosen for the emperor's household lived within the labyrinth of the Palatine palaces, places of dazzling beauty, but suffocating fear. To the outside world, they were invisible. Within, they were always on display. Some emperors kept entire harems of boys alongside women and eunuchs, hidden in private quarters away from the eyes of the Senate and the people. Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and other chroniclers whispered of emperors like Tiberius, Nero, and Commodus, each notorious for their indulgences, each rumored to keep youths in secret chambers. For the boys, the court was a gilded prison. They ate better food than most free citizens, slept under painted ceilings and wore fine tunics, yet every comfort was poisoned by fear. They could be summoned at any hour, commanded to serve in ways that erased their childhood, stripped of dignity. Their very beauty was a curse, for it made them targets of the most powerful men in the empire. The most terrifying aspect of their existence was the silence. Rome's law gave them no protection, no recognition of rights, no voice. They were property. If a master chose to discard them, they could be beaten, sold again, or executed without consequence. Chroniclers hint at boys who vanished from the palace, their names never recorded, their stories erased. Others survived only by becoming adept at reading the moods of their masters, learning to flatter, to obey instantly, to vanish into the background when danger loomed. To survive was to submit. Resistance was almost unthinkable. In public, these boys were hidden, invisible to the respectable world of senators, generals, and philosophers who debated virtue in the forum. Yet in private, they were omnipresent, silent figures at banquets, delicate attendants at imperial feasts, shadows in the emperor's chambers. They were a secret everyone knew, yet no one acknowledged. Their presence revealed the hypocrisy of Rome, a society that preached discipline and morality while indulging in the exploitation of its most vulnerable. This paradox, to be invisible yet constantly watched, to be exalted as ornaments yet despised as property, was the essence of their terror. Childhood for them was not a time of innocence, but of servitude, and thus their path was set, from captured child to branded slave, from market to palace, from person to possession. Their lives were no longer their own. They belonged to the empire, to the emperor, to the insatiable appetites of Rome. Inside the palace, daily life, exploitation, and the theatre of power. The palaces of the Caesars were glittering labyrinths filled with gold mosaics, marble statues, perfumed gardens, and endless corridors that whispered with secrets. To most Romans, the Palatine Hill was a place of awe and mystery, a seat of divine majesty where emperors lived as gods among men. But for the boys kept within its chambers, it was a gilded cage, one that demanded their youth, their silence, and their submission. The day for these boys began not with play or freedom, but with duty. They woke early, often before dawn, summoned by chamberlains or eunuch overseers. They tended to the emperor's chambers, arranging his garments, fetching his bathwater, preparing perfumes and oils. For the ruler of Rome, every gesture was an act of theatre, and these boys were the stagehands who kept the illusion alive. They moved quietly, heads bowed, never meeting the emperor's eyes unless permitted. They learned to anticipate his moods, to have sandals ready when he wished to walk, goblets of wine filled at the exact moment he desired to drink. Fans waved before he grew warm. To falter was dangerous, for emperors were not men to be disappointed. The whip, exile to harsher labor, or sudden disappearance into silence awaited those who failed. For emperors like Caligula or Nero, who were infamous for their cruelty, these duties came with an edge of terror. A boy could be plucked from menial service and forced into darker roles, his beauty turned into a spectacle at feasts, his humiliation a source of laughter among Rome's elite. To live in the palace was to live always on the precipice of fear. At imperial banquets, the boys were placed in full view of Rome's most powerful men and women. Dressed in delicate tunics or adorned with jewels, they served dishes and poured wine, moving silently among senators and generals. They were ornaments as much as servants, their presence a reminder of the emperor's wealth and his power to command beauty and youth. The banquets themselves were theatres of excess. Guests reclined on couches laden with peacock, boar, and exotic fruits while music played and dancers performed. The boys moved among them like shadows, but their role was not simply to serve, it was to enhance the aura of indulgence. Chroniclers whisper of emperors who delighted in parading their boy attendants, flaunting them as symbols of their dominion, mocking the Senate by forcing them to watch in silence. For the boys, every banquet was a stage of humiliation. They were visible, but not acknowledged, desired, but not respected. They were objects, silent props in the theatre of imperial power, but it was in the private chambers of the emperors that the boys' lives became most terrifying. Here, the thin veil of ceremony fell away. The emperor's whims dictated everything. Some emperors were known to keep harems of boys hidden away, attended by eunuchs, never allowed to leave the palace walls. Others brought them forth as trophies, forcing them to sing, dance, or perform in ways that stripped them of dignity. Ancient writers record chilling accounts. Suetonius writes that Tiberius filled the island of Capri with minnows, boys who served his darkest pleasures. Nero paraded boys publicly as lovers, even going so far as to hold mock marriages. Commodus dressed them in costumes, parading them alongside himself in gladiatorial games. Whether exaggerated or true, these accounts reveal how common and normalized such exploitation was. To be a boy in the emperor's court was to live as property of the most powerful and most unpredictable man in the world. The boys themselves left no records. Their voices are lost to time. What survives are the accounts of senators, poets, and historians, men who viewed them as symbols of corruption rather than as human beings. Yet through these fragments, we glimpse the strategies of survival. Some boys learn to fade into invisibility, obeying instantly, avoiding the gaze of those above them. Others learn to flatter, to make themselves indispensable, to become favorites whose closeness to the emperor might protect them, at least for a time. But favoritism was dangerous too. The closer one was to the emperor's attention, the greater the risk of jealousy, sudden anger, or eventual discard. The palace was a world where survival meant submission, where every smile might hide cruelty, where every kind word could be a prelude to exploitation. For a boy trapped within its walls, safety was an illusion, always at the mercy of a master's whim. Beyond their suffering, these boys carried a symbolic weight. Their presence at court was not only for the emperor's pleasure, but for political display. To keep such attendance was a demonstration of wealth, of power, of the right to command bodies as well as armies. Senators who despised the practice could do nothing, for their silence was part of the theatre. To object was to risk death. To look away was to acknowledge the empire's hypocrisy. And so, the boys remained, visible yet invisible, admired yet despised, trapped in a system that consumed their youth as if it were just another luxury of empire. In the end, the daily life of Rome's boy concubines was not only about servitude or exploitation, it was about performance. They were cast in roles, attendants at dawn, ornaments at banquets, shadows in the emperor's chambers, and their very existence became part of the theatre of power that defined the empire. Exploitation, scandal, and the corruption of Rome's morality. If, within the palace, the boys were shadows and ornaments, outside the palace their presence became rumour, scandal, and symbol. Rome prided itself on discipline, on the old virtues of gravitas and virtus, the stern masculinity of its ancestors. Yet when news or whispers of boy concubinage spread through the city, it was treated as evidence of the empire's moral decay. These children, enslaved and broken within the emperor's household, became the unspoken emblem of how absolute power had corrupted Rome to its core. Roman historians, writing under the shadow of emperors, rarely recorded such practices directly, but when they did, their words carried venom. Suetonius accused Tiberius of filling Capri with young boys forced into degradation, describing them not as children, but as symbols of perversion. Tacitus, who despised imperial tyranny, cast such indulgences as proof of decline, emperors who turned from statecraft to indulgence, from governance to vice. For the common people, scandal carried a different weight. The mob adored spectacle and entertainment, but they despised arrogance and hypocrisy. When emperors flaunted boys in processions or paraded them at feasts, the people whispered. Gossip spread like fire through the Subura. The emperor surrounded by delicate youths, the palace turned into a brothel. Nero famously staged mock weddings to his boy favorites, making the entire city complicit in his indulgence. Caligula paraded his companions like trophies, and so their lives became doubly stolen, first by slavery, then by history. They were erased as persons and remembered only as signs of imperial vice. In the end, the presence of these boys in the emperor's household came to symbolize something larger. They were Rome's rot made flesh, the contradiction of an empire that conquered the world in the name of law and order, yet consumed the innocence of children in secret chambers. Their silence screamed louder than words. Beneath the marble and triumph, beneath the Senate's debates and the legion's victories, lay a system of cruelty, normalized, even celebrated. This was the scandal of Rome's boy concubines, that they revealed not only the corruption of emperors but the corruption of Rome itself.